Let's Get Invisible is another pretty alright book. The cover is pretty solid too, but the artwork kind of bugs me. It's supposed to be a kid slowly turning invisible, but it's really hard to notice. You have to really look at the kid's legs to see the change in opacity. Although, it is pretty impressive that Jacobus painted this. But still, not really a fan of this artwork, especially the kid's expression. What I am a big fan of, though, is the classic Goosebumps reprint. For one, it's more obvious that the kid is disappearing, and two, it's a lot more ominous without seeing the kid's head. The win here is definitely gonna go to the reprint. Going to the book, it's a good metaphor for drugs and peer pressure. These kids find a mirror that turns them invisible, and they keep turning invisible for longer and longer time periods until eventually they get sucked into the mirror world. With that being said, the premise of this one can make the book a little boring and repetitive, since each chapter is basically a kid disappearing and then being like, oh, are they gonna come back? Ah, yeah, they're back. Okay, let's do it again. Oh, are they gonna come back? Oh, it's been a little longer now. Ah, they came back. But I think that the twist ending also opens the door to a lot of theories. The little brother in this one is nicknamed Lefty.
Lefty is $5! You guys seeing this
because he throws with his left hand. And at the end of the story, he's throwing with his right hand, which means that the mirror clone of him escaped. But it's kind of confusing since the other mirror clones got sucked into the mirror when it broke, and the supposed mirror clone of Lefty stayed outside. So does this mean that the little brother was always right-handed and Lefty was the mirror clone? Look, it may have just been R.L. Stine accidentally leaving a plot hole in the book, but I think it leads to some interesting theorizing. Nothing else to say about this one, it's pretty solid. Alright, it's been 15 entries since the last camping-themed book, so that should show you how much better the Horror at Camp Jelly Jam is. The cover, though? I know a lot of people really like this artwork of this guy smiling, but it's just a guy. And I know it's an eerie smile that reflects the trance that this guy's in, but still, it's just a guy. The color scheme is really the only thing holding this cover up in my opinion. Everything else just seems pretty silly. I think the reprint cover is a little more interesting and scary, but like Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, it gives away the ending to the book. With just one look at this cover, we know there's gonna be a giant jelly monster. I could see myself choosing either cover depending on the day, but right now, I'm feeling like going with the reprint. Even if I know what the ending is gonna be, I at least want to see how we got there. This guy on the front is honestly just gonna deter me from reading the book. Speaking of the book, the plot of this one is actually pretty well developed, and it may actually be set in my home state of Wyoming. These two kids are riding in a trailer and it detaches somewhere in Idaho or Wyoming, considering they were driving through the mountains at the time, and the dad said that Wyoming is home to the mountains.
I think this is Wyoming.
Anyways, the place where the two kids crash landed is King Jelly Jam's sports camp. A place where you're encouraged to be the best and win a ton of king coins, aka medals. And once you participate in the winner's walk for winning 6 king coins, then you disappear. The main character, Wendy, tries to find where these missing kids are going, and she ends up finding out that all of the camp leaders are in a trance. And they are in this trance to help find kids that will serve King Jelly Jam. But here's where I thought the book got a little too goofy for my taste. The kids who won the games had to clean King Jelly Jam, because Jelly Jam smells so bad that if he smells himself, he'll die. But he was described way too much, and it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Pun intended. Even though this one has a pretty intricate story and even ends up having a happy ending, it felt like the sibling dynamics in this one, and the way that King Jelly Jam was written could have been a little better. Okay, I need to dish out some apologies to my best friend is invisible and Bad Hair Day, because It Came From Beneath the Sink has got to be the worst cover of the original Goosebumps run. I mean, literally, there is not a single redeeming quality about this one. It got ones across the board. One thing I haven't mentioned with these Goosebumps books is that the tagline on the front isn't the only tagline on the book. There's also some sort of tagline to introduce the blurb on the back, and I don't bring those up because I only judge the tagline on the front cover. But in this case, the tagline on the back is so much better. Instead of, it's warm, it's breathing, and it doesn't do dishes, we have, their luck's about to go down the drain. That literally ties into the story so much better than whatever the hell this dish thing is. Why didn't they just make that the main tagline? And while I'm at it, I might as well fix the rest of the cover too! Look at the 2003 reprint. The color scheme of the border matches the color scheme of the artwork. Speaking of the artwork, the UK cover manages to defy the stereotype of the UK artworks being so much worse by giving us a cover where we actually get to see an evil sponge instead of just two goofy eyes. And you know how the UK cover usually has the object drowning in this goop? It actually looks like bubbles here. So what if we got Tim Jacobus' artwork of something under the sink, plus the sponge and these cleaning supplies, plus some suds, boom! I fixed the cover! Okay, that's all my rant is gonna be. Now we're actually gonna talk about the book itself. And boy, oh boy, am I excited to talk about this one, because this book actually ends up being really good. It's one of the most out there concepts of the series, a monster sponge that ends up causing bad luck. And this isn't just raining on your birthday party bad luck, we're talking about falling off of ladders and stepping on nails bad luck. After the main character gives the sponge away, they do some research on the sponge monster and find out that it's called a gruel. And if you give the gruel away, you're gonna die in 24 hours. So then the main characters have to find the gruel before the main character dies. And then, instead of being angry to the gruel because the gruel feeds off of anger, the main character decides to be nice to the gruel and the gruel loses all its power. But it turns out that the main character's bad luck isn't over because they also find a potato with fangs called a lynx. And while doing research on the gruel, they found that a lynx is way more deadly. This is a really dark and fun Goosebumps book. I just really wish the cover was something better. Because if it was, this one easily could have been in the top 20 or even top 10. Going from probably my least favorite cover to one I really like, we have the Cuckoo Clock of Doom. I've always just really liked this cover for some reason. It's all pretty nice to look at. The title is kind of goofy, but in an interesting way. I want to see why this cuckoo clock causes doom. The tagline is a pun, but a good kind of pun, and everything else is pretty good. This is an example of how to do a goofy cover right. You know, I really wish I could own this cover. After all, this was reprinted in one of those retro tins, which I have 2 of already. Unfortunately, the limited edition in these retro tins is really present in the orange tin because I cannot find this anywhere. And it really sucks because all 5 of the books in this tin are really good. The worst book in this tin is Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, and that was just barely not in the top half. That would be a lot better than the purple tin, which has 3 of my least favorite books in the series. But look, I'm not going to complain too much. I still like the fact that they reprinted these books with the classic covers and these cool tins. Going back to the Cuckoo Clock of Doom, this one has a really good premise, I just wish it did more with it. It's about a kid with a really bratty little sister named Tara, referred to as Tara the Terrible, and once the dad brings home a cuckoo clock, he messes with the clock in order to get his sister in trouble, but then he starts traveling backwards through time. But my big problem with this book is that even though the main character travels back in time to all these bad points in his life, he still receives all the bad outcomes that he had earlier. And it's not like he tries all that hard to try and change the events. It's like if he travels back in time and was like, oh, this is the day I stubbed my toe. Let's walk into this wall and see what happens. But on the other hand, I really liked the urgency and also helplessness that was present in this one. Eventually, he gets to a point where he's 4 years old and even a baby. So although he knows that he's running out of time to try and get the cuckoo clock back to normal, there's not much he can do to try and change his fate at this point. But the thing that really elevates this book into passable tier is the ending. Remember that bratty little sister we were talking about? Yeah, she ends up getting erased from time. She was born in a year that isn't present on the cuckoo clock, and the cuckoo clock is like, take the L, that sucks, we're going on without you. The crazy part is, I didn't think that Tara was as bad as some of the other annoying characters in Goosebumps books. Where was the Cuckoo Clock of Doom when Kermit was present? Where were you, Cuckoo Clock? But I don't know, maybe I think Tara isn't that bad just because I went into this book knowing she was gonna get erased at the end. Even though this book can be repetitive and frustrating, it does get really funny and entertaining in the second half of the book, which is why it's gonna get a passing grade from me. One Day at Horrorland. The best Goosebumps cover ever. A perfect score. My sister painted the artwork of this one for me. That's how good this one is. The classic Goosebumps reprint tries something different, and I appreciate the creativity, but look, it's just not gonna happen. The OG cover is gonna get the win in every universe. And going to the book,
I mean, it's alright, like...
this is another one that ends up being more funny than it is scary, especially with how ridiculous the end gets. It's basically a family that visits this theme park, and all of the rides are near-death experiences. The beginning and end are fun, but the middle is kind of a nothing burger. The beginning, okay, you're trapped here because your car exploded. The end, okay, you're trying to escape the park, but it turns out it was all a big prank show, but also you have to escape through this tent of monsters that isn't a prank. And then when you get back home, they're like, okay, do you want to come again? And then for the middle, instead of going on the rides, just like, don't go on the rides? This is a book where I can understand if you like it, but for me, the plot just wasn't there. Return of the Mummy is another sequel that ends up being worse than the original, but this time, it ends up being pretty fun. And the cover is pretty solid too. It's one of the few times that a sequel has a better title than the original. The classic Goosebumps cover is basically the exact same thing, just in the cartoony Brandon Dorman art style. This is one of the times where I really don't have a preference between the covers. Tim Jacobus' artwork has a very similar background as the first Mummy book, and the reprint has a skinny mummy hand, which I really don't like. And as I'm writing the script for this, I still am undecided on which one I prefer, so editing Ben, just go ahead and pick one. As the cover suggests, this is just another mummy story. The main characters find a mummy, and we think either this reporter or these workers are trying to steal the mummy for themselves. I know there's a twist that the reporter is actually like some sort of princess or friend of the mummy, and she's trying to get the mummy resurrected via this scarab frozen in amber. I don't really remember much about this one. It's pretty forgettable, but the good kind of forgettable, where you read it and you're like, yeah, that was pretty good. Although I will mention, I really do love the desert camp setting of this one. Speaking of camp, The Curse of Camp Cold Lake, which has probably the scariest piece of artwork that Tim Jacobus ever made. The color scheme of the border matches the artwork perfectly. It's just a shame that the tagline really sucks. But if we were just talking about the artwork, this one would be number one by far. As for the book, it's one I remember really liking as a kid, even though I kind of skipped around when reading it and don't think I ever read the whole thing start to finish. And when I read it as an adult, I thought it was fine, but it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. This book is a very mixed bag. For instance, I love the premise. It follows an indoorsy kid going to camp. And I thought it was a nice twist, since normally in these camping books, the protagonist loves going camping, but in this case, it's the opposite. But on the other hand, her bunkmates in this book absolutely suck. They're the type of people that bully you and then think you're the worst person when you take revenge. And the main character's revenge doesn't feel as justified as it should, since she does complain a lot. But still, the main character Sarah not wanting to be at camp does lead to the main plot of this book. To try and gain some sympathy, Sarah pretends to drown herself, but she should have seen this clip from SpongeBob.
Pretending to drown. No.
Sarah ends up actually drowning and straight up dying for a moment. It's not explicitly stated in the book, but it is heavily implied. When Sarah resurfaces, the camp is covered in snow, and it looks like it's the middle of winter instead of summer. No one's at the camp except for this one girl named Della, who's ominously singing in the background. This is probably the darkest and scariest scene in all of Goosebumps. Anyways, after Sarah is resuscitated, the rest of the book follows her trying to escape from the ghost of Della, who wants to kill her and become her buddy. I did think the twist in this one was cleverly written though. Sarah thinks that Della drowned, but the camp counselors tell her that no one has ever drowned at the camp. And while we think that that's a lie, it turns out they're correct because Della ran away but got bitten by a venomous snake in the woods. One of the bunkmates, Brianna, saves Sarah from Della, but Brianna is a ghost too, and Brianna wants Sarah to be her buddy now. Look, I know I just said I like this twist, but it still has its problems. For one, how did the camp counselors not tell Sarah about Della? Like, they had to have had this girl in their records somehow. Even if they knew she didn't drown, wouldn't they have known that she ran away? And also, Sarah couldn't see Della until she died, so why could she see Brianna the whole time? And I'm pretty sure everyone else could see Brianna too. Make it make sense, R.L. Stein. I feel like this one is pretty okay on surface value, pun intended, but the more I think about it, the more nitpicky problems I have with it, which is why it falls in the middle of the list. With The Haunted School, I now realize that we are getting into the truly iconic covers. At first, this artwork seems kind of boring. It's just stuff falling out of a locker. But upon closer inspection, notice how everything else is colorful and the stuff coming out of this locker is in grayscale. And upon even closer inspection, do you see those eyes in the locker? I think the tagline is really ominous and the color scheme works fairly well, but the title is pretty basic. It's just The Haunted School. It's not horrible, so it's gonna get a 2, it's just really basic. Even the book itself isn't really about ghosts haunting the school. It's more about another dimension/world that makes all the color drain from you. Which, yeah, I guess is basically just that one episode of Powerpuff Girls with the clown. The main characters end up getting trapped in this other dimension, and when they ask the other kids for help, they're like, yeah bro, we've tried, you're stuck here. It ends up being really depressing. And when they explore outside of the grayscale school, they see kids who have fully turned gray and want to convert the main characters to the grayscale as well. And there's a weird cultish scene where they end up like spitting black ink in something. It's kind of confusing and hard to describe, but I thought it was pretty interesting. Also, there is pretty good expectation subversion, as we learn that there is one kid who escaped the gray world. We think it's this emo kid in the real world, but it actually ends up being this other kid who keeps on applying lipstick because that's the only way that she can keep her color. The lipstick makes a portal out of Grey World and the main characters are saved. But the whole reason that the kids ended up in Grey World is because they got their photo taken by this guy named Mr. Chameleon, and guess how the book ends, with the kids in the real world getting their photo taken by Mr. Chameleon. It is a pretty good twist ending, it just ends up being fairly sudden. Although this book is pretty slow at times, the concept does make up for it, and I feel like it's a pretty good read. Alright, next on the list we have The Haunted Mask. Wait a minute, Ben. Did you just say The Haunted Mask is only 23 on your list? That's like the best Goosebumps book of all time! What are you doing, bruh? Never rank again! Yes, I know, but hear me out. First of all, this is an iconic cover. But like with Night of the Living Dummy, I really wish that there was something else in the background of this artwork. Yes, Carly Beth in the mask does look awesome, but we need something else here. And I'm sorry, but The Haunted Mask is just an average title. Sure, a haunted mask is a unique concept, but the title, just like The Haunted School, is The Haunted insert noun here. The only reason I'm bumping this one up to 3 points is just because of the mask idea. But look, even I have to shout out the amazing tagline for this one. And by the way, the original cover is gonna win the battle by far. Why is the perspective for the reprint cover so far away? It looks like it's a news report. For those of you who don't know, this book is about a girl named Carly Beth who ends up getting teased by a lot of her friends. On Halloween night, she puts on a scary mask to try and get back at them. And that's the majority of this book. It's just Carly Beth running around and trying to scare her friends. It's a cool concept, especially how Carly Beth, who starts off as this innocent girl, starts turning really evil. But it does get a little confusing of whether it's Carly Beth that is taking revenge or if it's the mask itself. I get that's the whole point, but the way it's written is a little confusing on what they want us to believe. Especially with the voice of the mask itself. Sometimes it's the mask itself giving Carly Beth the raspy voice, and other times it's Carly Beth doing it herself, but also Carly Beth might have a normal voice sometimes. I don't know. Nevertheless, this one has a great ending. I think what people remember most about this book is the final few chapters. The part that everyone remembers about this book is that the mask doesn't come off of Carly Beth. The reason for this is that the mask was unloved by its creator, or it might have just been an actual face, I don't know, I confuse the episode in the book all the time, but it's one of those. The only way to get the mask off of Carly Beth is for Carly Beth to have some symbol of love. So she finds the sculpture of her head that her mom made for her, and that makes the mask come off. It's a really good metaphor for being who you are, but like I said, the rest of the book is just kind of middle of the road. So that's why I'm only gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. But even then, this is still one that I would definitely recommend. Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. I I think this is one of my roommate's favorite Goosebumps books, if not his favorite. And hey, I remember liking it as a kid too. The cover is good, it has one of the few really stupid puns that I enjoy. The Scarecrow in the field is a great visual, and The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight is such an ominous title. If the color scheme was a little better and not just ketchup and mustard, this one would definitely be a 5 out of 5 cover. And yeah, this is another one where I'm gonna give the win to the OG cover.
For the OG.
The classic Goosebumps cover makes the Scarecrow look like a walking jack-o'-lantern. And Goosebumps fans know that walking jack-o'-lanterns get their own separate book, which I will talk about later. Now onto the book. I really love the setting of this one. It's set on a rural farm. It's set on a rural, I cannot say it. Rural, how do you say it? Okay, this one. It's set on one of those farms, and I don't know what it is about farms, but it just works with horror. I mean, this book as a whole is a better version of The Tale of the Silent Servant from Are You Afraid of the Dark? Mainly because instead of just one creepy scarecrow, there are like 20 creepy scarecrows. And R.L. Stine utilizes these to his advantage because we actually get to see the scarecrow move in a lot of creepy dream sequences. The main thing that brings this one down is that it is easily predictable. When we get to the farm, we learn that the grandparents, which are usually fun to the main characters, start acting weird and do whatever this farmhand Stanley wants. And so we're thinking, yeah, he's got something to do with the scarecrows. And Stanley's motivation could have been a little better, but it turns out that there are some scarecrows that have been alive the whole time, and when Stanley hears this, he's like, okay, time to make them all alive. But like, wouldn't he just put him back to sleep because the grandparents didn't break the rules? I don't know, I kind of forget how this was written, but it was a little weird. Still, I would recommend this one for the setting and writing alone. It'll probably give you a great idea of how to write horror. Werewolf Skin has another really solid cover. The artwork isn't exactly representative of the story. Werewolf Skin isn't something that you buy and is shipped to you in a box, but the imagery is gonna make you pick up the book, and I appreciate that. And everything else about the cover complements the artwork. It's just barely not a 5 out of 5. Going on to the story, it's pretty basic for werewolf standards. I forget a lot about this one, but I do remember the ending because it was really good. Basically, there are werewolves, and they learn that werewolves shed their skin, and the only way to get rid of the curse is to destroy the skins. The main character thinks that the neighbors are the werewolves, but it actually turns out that the relatives he's staying with are werewolves. But him and his new friend end up breaking the curse anyway. Although, it turns out that his friend was also a werewolf, and she bites him as the story ends. It's another solid one, not really much else to say. Here's a fun fact about how I got my shrunken head. This was the first Goosebumps book with a classic cover I ever got my hands on. It ends up being pretty iconic, if a bit flawed. Green is my favorite color, so I'm obviously gonna love this color scheme, and it matches the shrunken head on the artwork too. The title is intriguing, but albeit a little misleading. The story isn't about how he got his shrunken head, as it happens in like the first 4 chapters. But now I have to get on with my biggest problem with this cover, the artwork. I know Tim Jacobus is known for his wonky perspectives, but if you imagine this room in real life, that head is not shrunken. If anything, it is larger than a human head. And also, what's up with this college flag on the wall? I get that for legal reasons you probably can't put a real college on a kid's book cover, but if you're just gonna have the flag say, University, just don't put it on the cover at all. The classic Goosebumps cover fixes both of my problems with this artwork. Brandon Dorman's artwork makes the head big and the center of attention while still scaling everything down so that the head is actually a shrunken head. And you can make out that the university flag has a made-up mascot of the Vikings. That is so much better than University. The win here is definitely going to the reprint.
It's the new red.
Going to the book, it's a fun jungle adventure. Even though Legend of the Lost Legend is one of my least favorites in the series, when Stine gets the adventure genre right, like in the Mummy books or this one, it is very well written. Even though the middle of this book gets a little repetitive, because it's just the main character escaping from dangerous situations by using his jungle magic and the shrunken head, I think that the beginning and end of this book are well written enough that you can't help but love it. It's one that I might rank a little lower on a reread, but it ends up just being a good, fun time. Don't Go to Sleep. This is one of the covers where the artwork really doesn't fit the story at all, but at least here, it's striking enough to grab your attention. While I'm not a big fan of the color scheme, the title and tagline do enough to elevate this cover to a 3 out of 5. And this is a book that has a really fun concept, and it's one of the most unique in the series. The main character in this one is constantly picked on and belittled by his older siblings, and he wants a bigger room to sleep in. He goes against his mom's orders and sleeps in the guest room, but it turns out that when he went to sleep on the bed, he ended up opening a tear in the fabric of the universe, and every time he wakes up, he's in a different dimension? And the story gets creative with this idea too. First, he's in high school instead of middle school, then he has different parents, and then he's in a circus family, and then he's Godzilla? Meanwhile, the main character now has the reality police tracking him down and trying to close the rift in time. All the while, the main character is trying to get back to his own dimension. If I have any notable complaints with this one, it's probably the ending. It's supposed to be a dark ending, with the mom finally listening to the wishes of the main character to sleep in the guest room. But this is easily avoidable. What if the main character's just like, no wait, I changed my mind! But still, this one is very fun. I'm a big fan of multiverse stories, and I think this one pulls it off really well. How to Kill a Monster, the first 5 out of 5 cover we've seen in a while. The artwork does its job while not being too flashy and distracting, and everything else about this cover is perfect. Going to the book, this is kind of a weird one for me to talk about. It has a lot of plot holes, and I really shouldn't like the book because of those, but the tension in this one is written so well that it manages to carry the book on its own. The story of this one is that the main characters are staying with their grandparents in a secluded house in the swamp, and it turns out that the grandparents have captured a swamp monster and are keeping it upstairs. The grandparents leave the house and lock the main characters inside while the grandparents go to the town for help, and the main characters, instead of reading the letters that the grandparents left behind, end up opening the door that the swamp monster is kept behind, and all hell breaks loose. The biggest problem with this one is that the grandparents are kind of insane for just leaving letters telling the kids what to do instead of just telling the kids outright that there was a monster in the house. But like I said, the dynamics of the monster chasing the kids around the house is written really well, and it's able to create genuine tension. The kids are ultimately unsuccessful from escaping the monster, but when the monster goes to eat the kids, he goes, "Oh wait, are you guys human?" And the kids are like, "Yeah, but you can talk, bro?" And the monster's like, well, yeah, I could talk, but are you guys human? And they're like, yeah. He's like, oh god, I'm allergic to you guys. And then he just dies. And then now that the monster's dead, the main characters escape from the house, read another letter that the grandparents left behind, and learn that there are more swamp monsters in the swamp. And since the kids are outside now, then they're very vulnerable. But shouldn't the kids be safe here? We know that the swamp monster that was inside the house was allergic to humans, so what's stopping us from assuming that these swamp monsters are all allergic to humans too? But who knows, maybe they're just built different. Once again, this one has its flaws, but I think that it's really fun, and that's why I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. See? I told you that we would get to the walking jack-o'-lanterns soon enough. Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns is another one of my favorite covers. The artwork is amazing, the color scheme is amazing, the title is amazing. All that's not perfect is the tagline, and even then, it's still pretty fitting. The classic Goosebumps reprint tries something different by only having one pumpkin guy, but I really like the colors on this one and the way that it's drawn. But if I had to pick one, I'm still gonna go with the original. There's something about this gang of trick-or-treating jack-o'-lanterns that seems really ominous and fun at the same time. This was a book that I was really excited to read for my marathon, as I remember it being one of my favorites as a kid. And I did still like it, but I have to admit, the pacing is pretty slow. After all, the first half of this book is just flashbacks and dream sequences. The first half consists of the main character talking about how she loves Halloween, but how she also wants to get back at these two bratty kids for ruining Halloween a few years ago by pulling a prank on her and her friends. And so, to get back at them, the main characters are planning a prank to take revenge. The two main characters are waiting for their twin friends to show up so the four of them can go trick-or-treating with the bratty kids and pull a prank on them. But instead of the twins showing up, we see these two jack-o'-lantern people. And it's pretty predictable that the twins are the jack-o'-lanterns the whole time, but the book kind of tries to make you think otherwise. Towards the end of the book, the main characters take the jack-o'-lanterns off their heads and they find out that there is no neck underneath. So it kind of makes us think that this isn't the twins, because after all, where would the rest of their costume be? But the main reason why I love this one is the Halloween setting. Everyone's costumes are described and we get to have fun going trick-or-treating. But the jack-o'-lanterns force the kids to stay out later and later, and it gets a little scary. And no, the main characters can't just run away, the jack-o'-lanterns have this superhuman ability to block them in their path. After the jack-o'-lanterns successfully scare off the bratty kids, it is revealed that these were the twins the whole time. But these aren't just any ordinary twins, they were aliens the whole time. The main characters knew that the twins were aliens, and they knew that they had shape-shifting powers, hence which is why they're able to shape-shift into the jack-o'-lanterns. But what the main characters didn't know is that the aliens eat people. And it turns out that they ate 4 adults who went missing just before Halloween night. We heard about the adults going missing in a news report prior, and it's why the main character's mom didn't want the main characters to go trick-or-treating. But other than that, it was just something we kept in the back of our heads. But with the friendly and human-eating aliens, it was a nice way to tie everything together. Overall, while this one is paced pretty slow, it does have some really fun elements, which is why I definitely recommend reading this one. Vampire Breath is a cover that is very solid overall, but it's affected by a horrible tagline. Open up and say mouthwash? Like, that doesn't even relate to the book at all. That only relates to bad breath. How is bad breath connected to vampire breath? Luckily, the rest of the cover makes up for that sad excuse for a tagline, and the artwork here is pretty creepy. When compared to the classic Goosebumps reprint, it's definitely gonna get the win.
Another victory for the OG.
I feel like this is one of the times where the cartoony art style of Brandon Dorman really doesn't work. The colors all blend together, and it's really hard to tell what's happening. The white clothing of Count Nightwing is very distracting. It looks more like garlic than his actual clothing, and maybe that is the whole point, but it just doesn't work for me. It's really distracting, and it makes the green vampire breath coming out of his mouth really hard to notice. This is a book that I remember my 4th grade teacher had in her classroom, and I started to read it, but I don't think I got farther than the first few chapters. But I don't think that's because this one is boring, I just think it's because of my low attention span in elementary school. This one is pretty solid. The main characters end up finding a coffin containing Count Nightwing in a secret compartment of their house. He's a pretty silly old vampire. He doesn't have his fangs, so he needs vampire breath, but the vampire breath is like out, so he travels back in time to get more vampire breath, but he might have traveled back in time using the vampire breath. I don't know, it gets kind of confusing, I don't remember the details. But the rest of this story is the main characters trying to get back to their own time, and the setting is this dark, creepy castle. There's a lot of good twists, and Count Nightwing is a perfect balance between scary and silly. And we especially see that in the ending, where the main characters end up bringing Count Nightwing back to the future with them. But it turns out that Count Nightwing is actually the main character's grandfather or something, and the main character's parents are vampires, which makes him a vampire too. His fangs just haven't grown in yet. And as for the side character, which is his best friend, she ends up being a werewolf. R.L. Stine definitely had a lot of fun writing this ending, and it's one that's really silly and you can't help but love it. Even though I did have to look up the plot of this one on the Goosebumps wiki for a quick refresher, it is a very fun book and I definitely recommend it. I Live in Your Basement, the last original story in the classic 62 Goosebumps books. And I gotta say, it's a pretty good entry to almost go out on. The artwork is pretty cool, the title is very threatening, and the color scheme matches the veiny blob monster on the front. The tagline of "Talk about a monster nightmare" is usually one I would dislike, but here it ends up being a double entendre, and I'll get to that later. But also, it does kind of spoil the book, so I kind of don't like it. Look, it's a weird one, so I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5. But going back to the book, this is definitely one of the best concepts for a Goosebumps story. It's about a kid named Marco who gets hit by a softball bat and he ends up getting some head trauma from it. When Marco gets home, he keeps on getting letters and messages from this kid named Keith who says he lives in Marco's basement. Marco tries telling this to his mom and his friends, but they pass it off as deliriousness from his head trauma. And because of that, it definitely makes this the best of the boy who cried wolf kind of stories. I know a lot of people like the Night of the Living Dummy books for the ventriloquist dummy approach to this concept, but that ultimately fails for me if the main character isn't performing with the ventriloquist dummy. Here, we're going to question whether we believe Marco or the people around him for the whole story. It's kind of like that one infamous Twilight Zone episode, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Because in that one, a guy who ended up having a mental breakdown on an airplane says that he sees a gremlin on the wing, but no one believes him. And if the book would have stayed like that, it would have been alright, but nothing special. But luckily, this gets banana pants crazy in the second half. The girl who hit Marco with the softball bat comes over to his house, and then she just turns herself inside out? What the fuck? But luckily, that was just a dream, and Marco is still in the hospital meeting with his doctor. His doctor tells Marco to open up his mouth, and the doctor starts pulling out Marco's tongue forever and ever and ever. Okay, and that was a dream too. And then from this point on, it kind of just turns into the end of that SpongeBob episode, Doing Time, where we keep on thinking it's real life, but it turns out to just be another dream. I mean, seriously, there's like 4 different types of these dream or not dream scenarios. But to connect it back to the cover, I gotta give some props to R.L. Stine, because this blob monster on the cover is actually the alien Keith who turned himself inside out. So yes, that does mean that this Goosebumps cover has actual alien gore on it. And now you get the whole monster nightmare tagline, because it turns out that all of these dreams were from the perspective of Keith, and he's worrying that Marco's gonna find out that he lives in his basement. This one's scary, it's gory, it just gets a bit too crazy for me at times. But even then, it's definitely a really forgotten banger of a Goosebumps book. Okay, I know I've brought up the Curse of the Mummy's Tomb a lot, and now it's finally time for me to talk about it. And now you can see what I meant when I said that Return of the Mummy had a very similar background as The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Speaking of this title, it's pretty basic, but again, not awful, so it's gonna be a 2 out of 5. But everything else about this cover is pretty solid, and that makes up for it. The classic Goosebumps reprint makes it so the mummy is actively walking through the pyramid, but I think I like the subtlety of Tim Jacobus' version. Win goes to the original.
Victory for the OG.
Just like Return of the Mummy, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb has a very fun Indiana Jones vibe going for it. We don't really see any real mummies moving until the end, but it works. Because for the rest of the book, it's just the 2 main characters getting lost in the pyramids and Egypt while running away from this guy who seems to always be following them. And it turns out that that guy is an evil descendant of the mummies or the Egyptians or the people who lived there before. I don't know, I forget which one, but point is he's evil. The end of this one was really fun too, and it tied everything together in a nice way. If I have any complaint with this one, it's just that R.L. Stine kept making the main character's shoe untied whenever the main character had to get lost. Like, literally, that was the only excuse. It never changed, and it really started to piss me off after a while. I forgot to mention it while I was talking about the book, but this is the first Goosebumps book I ever read. And I gotta say, this is a great introduction for the series, especially if you want a book that's not too scary. Other than Monster Blood 2 and 4, The Haunted Mask 2 is the only other sequel I like more than the original. While the cover here isn't as iconic as the original, a lot of people say that the mask is ugly, and I get that. But it works as it connects to the story. I like the contrast between the body of a kid and the face of an old, decaying man. And the tagline here is really good too. It's one of the better sequel taglines. I didn't know this until I looked it up, but this one actually got 2 classic Goosebumps reprints. They both have the same artwork by Brandon Dorman, it's just that one is a little more color corrected. Although it doesn't really matter which one it is, because I think either way the original cover is still gonna be
Not victory for the OG.
Although I do like the colors on the second classic Goosebumps cover, so if I look at that one some more, I might change this decision. But anyways, this is a sequel that does a great job at playing off of the original. It definitely wouldn't make sense for Carly Beth to be the main character again after her experience in the first book, so instead, this book is from the perspective of her friend Steve. Steve gets a mask to try and get revenge on these first graders that he has to do soccer coaching for, and once again, the mask ends up getting stuck to his face, but this time, instead of making him evil, it makes him an old man. And I think that really helps the tension and scariness of this story. My biggest flaw with the first Haunted Mask book is that there wasn't enough time developing the scariness of having a mask stuck to your face. But here, that's what most of this book is about, and it takes full advantage of that. If there's anything I would change, it's that the evil first graders didn't have an accurate reaction to seeing Steve with the mask. Instead, they think he's a poor old man and they try to help him stand up. But if you look at the cover and how the mask was described in the book, they definitely would not have that reaction. This guy was decaying. The ending is a little weird as well, as it turns out that this mask was a part of a larger costume, and as soon as Carly Beth finds the costume, then the mask hops off of Steve. Which, by the way, that is another cool thing about this book. Carly Beth makes an appearance in this one, and it's kind of like an Avengers cameo, the way that she comes in to save the day. But look, I was satisfied, and I think a lot of other Goosebumps fans were too. I think I'm in the minority when I say that Haunted Mask 2 is better than Haunted Mask 1, but look, it is my opinion at the end of the day, and I think that this is the book that was better executed. From one good sequel to another, here's Deep Trouble 2. And by the way, I think I should point out, from this book onwards, these are certified classics. Although the artwork for this one could use a little more pizzazz. I like the fish, and the shipwreck on the bottom is cool, but it just needs something else in the background. The tagline is lacking too. If they would have taken out that ... again, it probably would have been a little better. I have a fear of swimming in the ocean and lakes, mainly because I don't like swimming with fish and other plants and stuff in the water, and I think that's a big reason why this book works for me. Billy and his sister Sheena are staying with their uncle Dr. Deep on his boat, but they're noticing that the fish in the area are growing abnormally large. And this is because of experimental plankton that this other scientist planted in the area. The mad scientist wants the fish to grow so he can make like the ultimate aquarium or the ultimate fish industry. I don't know, it was one of those. That's another reason why I like the Deep Trouble books. They both have weird fish sea ethical politics, and I think that makes them pretty interesting. Anyways, the mad scientist throws the main characters overboard, and then they get stuck on an island for a little bit, and then they get back from the island, and then they end up back on the boat. And once they're there, the mad scientist says that he can make humans turn into fish too using the plankton. So he forces the main character Billy to eat the plankton, and when he does, nothing happens, but that's because Billy swapped it out with iced tea to try and get back at his sister Sheena for pulling a prank on him. So when the mad scientist gets mad and eats another vial, then he turns into a fish, and then the main characters are safe. But the ending isn't over yet, since Billy's sister Sheena said she set up the same thing with the iced tea plankton. However, when she eats her vial, she has a strange reaction and she questions if she had the right one. It's a fun, kind of dark ending, and I really like it. This is definitely the best sequel on the list. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I went back and forth debating if this deserves a 10 out of 10, and even if it was better than the original Deep Trouble. But in the end, I decided that this one moves a little too slow, which is why I'm going to keep it at a 9 out of 10. But still, this one is a definite must-read if you're getting into Goosebumps. Like Deep Trouble 2, Phantom of the Auditorium is one of my favorite books. It just has a very average cover. The color scheme, title, and tagline are all there, but the artwork is lacking something. I like the idea of the Phantom on the stage, but there's not much else besides him and the curtain. The classic Goosebumps cover has some more variety going for it. We still see a cloaked Phantom, but he's hiding under the stage, and I think that's a nice touch. The win for this one is going to go to the classic Goosebumps reprint. Going to the story, it ends up being very fun and decently unpredictable. The school puts on a cursed play, and spooky things keep happening that delay the production. Even though we want to believe that there is a real Phantom, we do have 3 candidates for someone who's being a little mischievous. There's this mysterious guy named Emil who says he's the night janitor. There's the main character's friend who keeps pulling pranks. There's this new kid who showed up and wants to be involved in the play. And there's this jealous girl that wants to take the main character's part in the play. It turns out that the quote-unquote Phantom who was delaying most of the production was Emil, the not night janitor, and he's actually a homeless guy who lived under the trapdoor of the theater. But when it's finally time for the real play to happen, instead of the main character's friend playing the part of the Phantom, it ends up being Brian, because it turns out he is the actual Phantom who died performing the show. Like I said earlier, it's a pretty simple ghost story, but I feel like it ends up working for Goosebumps. Not to mention that I really love the theater setting. Alright, we're starting the top 10 off with a banger. It's Welcome to Camp Nightmare. And if I was judging these solely off of the book itself, this would probably be a few spots higher, maybe even top 3. Unfortunately, this cover is really lacking. The color scheme is great, but the title and tagline are way too cheesy. Welcome to Camp Nightmare? Like, that's not even a clever pun. Same with It's the Little Camp of Horrors. That's not even a pun on shop. If you're gonna call it that, you gotta have something that rhymes. Going to the artwork, I like the concept, but the fact that the eyes are really far away from the arm really bugs me. Once again, the classic Goosebumps cover ends up executing this design a lot better. Mostly because you get to see more of the creature's body. The win is going to go to the reprint. The only thing that the classic cover has over the reprint is the orange sunset in the background. But enough about some silly drawings. I love this story. It's definitely my favorite of the 4 camping-themed books. This one basically revolves around a kid slowly learning he is trapped at a camp where all of his friends are disappearing one by one without a trace left of their existence. All the camp counselors are really intense and are ignoring all of the campers' demands. The main character, Billy, meets with these 2 girls at the girls' camp who also are noting similar things, and they plan to escape together. But the next day, the head counselor at the boys' camp tells everyone that 2 girls at the girls' camp went missing. He tells the boys to hunt them down with tranquilizer rifles. And Billy, not wanting to turn on his new friends, attempts to shoot the main counselor. But it turns out that the whole camp was a test for Billy to see if he could travel with his scientist parents. And because he had survival skills and threatened authority at the right times, he ended up passing. So now he can join his scientist parents on their expedition to Earth, because yes, they were all aliens the whole time. Some people say that we can do without the alien part since these kids had very human-like qualities, but look, I don't really care. Twilight Zone does those kind of twists all the time. My 4th grade teacher had that collection of 3 of the Goosebumps camping stories, which were Welcome to Camp Nightmare, Ghost Camp, and The Curse of Camp Cold Lake, and this is the one that I remember reading start to finish. It's a book that's stuck with me, and it's an all-time favorite, which is why this is gonna be our first 10 out of 10. And remember those retro tins that I was talking about? Yeah, there's a blue one coming out that has this book inside of it, so I'm gonna have to pre-order that as soon as I'm done recording this audio. And now, to talk about another book in the mythical orange tin, we have The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. It's definitely another 5 out of 5 cover. The tagline's a little basic, so it's only gonna get a 3. The color scheme perfectly matches the artwork, and I feel like the title is very descriptive and intriguing. Someone mentioned it would have been a little cooler if the werewolf looked more human-like. However, as you'll see me talk about, it does kind of play into the red herring that the book provides, so I think I'm still gonna leave it as a 10 out of 10. And by the way, win is gonna go to the classic cover.
Victory for the OG.
The reprint cover is just way too purple. It's missing that green of the original. I mean, really, there's so much purple that at first I thought the sky and swamp were the same thing. Going to the book, I'll have to admit, the beginning of it does start out pretty slow, but I think the rest of the book holds up. Just like Phantom of the Auditorium, it's a simple story, but it throws in a lot of red herrings to keep it varied. There's gotta be a werewolf killing all these animals in the swamp, but is it the swamp hermit who lives in a shack in the woods? Is it Grady's new dog Wolf that showed up at the house one night? Or is it any of Grady's new friends that he made in the town? Oh yeah, I kind of glossed over it, but this book gets very intense with its depictions of dead animals and werewolf attacks. Like, Grady will just be walking through the swamp and he's like, oh, that's a corpse. That's a corpse of a rabbit that got torn to shreds. In the end, it turns out that Grady's friend Will is the werewolf and he attacks Grady, but Grady's dog Wolf manages to fight Will off. But, as you'd expect, Grady got bitten by Will and now Grady is a werewolf. This is a book that's written really well and manages to make great use of its setting. My only big complaint with it is that Grady's parents were scientists doing an experiment on swamp deer and then they proceeded to go nowhere with that the whole book. If R.L. Stine wrote in something with that, then I could see this being a 9 or even a 10. But even then, I can see why this is one of a lot of people's favorites, and I'm glad I finally got to read it. The original Deep Trouble is a book that, going into my marathon, I did not think it would be this high at all. In fact, it's one I forgot about a lot prior to reading it. The cover is really good though, even if the artwork is just a straight up ripoff of Jaws, just replace a great white with a hammerhead. But the color scheme is really good, and the title and tagline work effectively enough. But this is another one where I prefer the classic Goosebumps reprint. For one, it's more original, and secondly, I think the hammerhead shark looks a lot more menacing. Just look at those teeth. Not to mention that they added a cool, creepy skull rock in the background. Which, okay, I take back what I said about originality because Peter Pan. But I feel like this is where Brandon Dorman's art style really shines. I mean, this looks beautiful. Just like with Deep Trouble 2, I love the setting of this one. It's actually the exact same, just the Deep family on a boat. But despite what the cover suggests, this one is actually about mermaids. But don't worry, that hammerhead shark does actually get involved because he straight up bites Billy and the mermaid saves him. This one has a lot more fish ethics than Deep Trouble 2, but like I said, I like that. And I think the whole mermaid thing is a cool question to ask, because do we categorize them as people or fish? Once the main characters find the mermaid, it doesn't want to be held captive, and these other people want to sell it to a zoo, but Dr. Deep says no. But it turns out that one of Dr. Deep's deckhands is in on the plan, and he throws the main characters overboard and steals the mermaid. Also, they get thrown overboard in the fish tank, and I think there's a lid on it, so I guess it wouldn't fill up all the way, but it ends up floating on the surface, and nah, with 3 people inside, you are sinking straight to the bottom. But look, it's a cool scenario, so it gets half a pass. There's also an awesome finish with this one. There's like a whole fiery boat battle, but the main characters kinda didn't need to be there if I remember correctly because the mermaids ended up saving the captured mermaid. But the twist ending is very funny because Billy finds a sea monster and then the book ends, but I guess he survived since there was a whole sequel with him in it again. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. It's one of my favorite adventure-type Goosebumps books, and I definitely recommend it. Calling All Creeps is another one that I didn't think I'd love as much as I do. This was another one I forgot about a lot, and I really can't see why. I love the dinosaur-looking creeps, and the whole phone booth idea fits the title. The tagline is perfectly cheesy, I just wish the color scheme was better. The hot pink is cool, but gray was a horrible color for the slime. Like Deep Trouble, this is one that I didn't read until I started my Goosebumps marathon, mainly because I saw a video of like top 5 scariest Goosebumps books and this was on the list. At the height of my Goosebumps addiction in 4th grade, a girl actually gave me this book to read, but I like threw a tantrum and said no just because of that whole top 5 scariest Goosebumps books video. So if that girl's watching this right now, sorry. Because yeah, after reading this, it wouldn't keep me up at night as a 4th grader, but it definitely has a very fun premise. It's basically if you got the loser kid idea from Why I'm Afraid of Bees and the revenge concept of You Can't Scare Me, and combine those into a book that was actually good. The main character Ricky gets bullied a lot, and he puts an ad in the school newspaper for his rival that says if you're a creep to call her. But then the rival sees this and ends up switching her name with his. So then Ricky starts getting calls from people who say they're creeps, and they're like, "Hey yo master, yo where we meeting?" Ricky ends up meeting the creeps at the meeting place, and he finds out that they're these weird dinosaur looking aliens and they want to turn everyone at the school into creeps as well. And by the way, these creeps aren't just random people, they're actually the bullies who bullied Ricky, but now they straight up worship this dude. And the rest of the book follows Ricky trying to find creative ways to make the creeps' plan fail. There's a few chapters where the creeps want to put the creep seeds that'll turn everyone to creeps into the mac and cheese. Ricky does this accepting defeat, but then when no one turns into creeps the next day, he realizes that no one eats the school mac and cheese, so Ricky's good. Creeps get mad at Ricky, but luckily his friend Iris intervenes and... Okay, look, I'm gonna go on a quick little tangent here. I haven't brought it up yet, but a lot of people assume that the Goosebumps books were at least somewhat ghost-written. And that's not to say that R.L. Stine didn't write them, just that the ghostwriters made some of the outlines. And I feel like this is one of the biggest cases of that being true. I was watching another YouTube channel talk about this book, and they brought up that this was a twist that was probably meant to be written into the story, but wasn't. The creeps keep talking about their master and where their master is, and they think it's Ricky, but we know it's not Ricky. Iris is this new girl who just showed up to the school, and we know that the creeps just got here, so is Iris supposed to be the real master? Apparently not, because Iris is really devoted to stopping the creeps. But anyways, tangent over, back to the actual book. The creeps put the creep seeds into cookies, and they force Iris and Ricky to sell them at the bake sale. Ricky tells the kids at the school not to eat the cookies, and then everyone starts bullying Ricky again. Then the creeps talk to Ricky, and they're like, Well, you know if they eat the cookies with the creep seeds, then they'll obey you, right? And Ricky's like, oh yeah, good point. Hey yo, everyone, yeah, you can eat the cookies. Yeah, they're really good for you. This book is mainly this high for that ending. It is so good. Goosebumps books normally have main characters that keep getting picked on or keep having bad things happen to them. And just like Cuckoo Clock of Doom, it's so nice for the main character to finally have some peace. This is the only book in the top 10 not to have a classic Goosebumps reprint, and I think it was a big missed opportunity on Scholastic's part. This book is a classic and I definitely recommend it. Alright, we've finally gotten to the lone savior of the Purpleton, A Night in Terror Tower. The tagline for this one is really the only thing bringing it down. I really don't get why the letters are spelled out. But I think that the color scheme and title are great, and the artwork is really iconic and cool. When looking at the classic Goosebumps reprints, I do really like the torches in the blue background, but the proportions on the Executioner look way too goofy. I mean seriously, it's literally like the wide Putin meme. The win is going to go to the original cover.
Victory for the OG.
Based on the title of this book, you would think it's about kids having to survive a night trapped in a tower, but it's really more of a psychological journey. While the two kids, Eddie and Sue, are on vacation in London, they do end up getting lost in the tower and they get by this guy in black clothing who wants them to follow him. But they actually escape him pretty easily, and pretty quickly too. So with half of the book being left and they already escaped from Terror Tower, what's next? Well, it turns out when they're paying their taxicab driver, it turns out they realize they have fake money and not real money. So when they go to the hotel to ask their parents for some real money, they can't find their reservation their parents had. And also, they can't even remember who their parents are, not to mention, they're not even remembering how they got there. And I feel like that idea of being lost while also not knowing how you got there and who you even are is a really scary concept. It turns out that Eddie and Sue are actually members of the ye olde royal family and they got put into the future to try and escape execution. But now the executioner has followed them, and then they go back in time, and then, they have to end up escaping the executioner. And the rest of it is pretty cool, but not as cool as the middle. But regardless, this was one of my favorite books to read as a kid, and it is still one of my favorites now. Welcome to Dead House, the first Goosebumps book ever written, and I gotta say, they started it out with a banger. The cover definitely set the tone for the series too. It's a really creepy looking haunted house. What else is there for me to say about it? Well, I guess this evil guy in the window, yeah, it's kind of a jump scare, and I didn't even notice him until I got a copy of this. Once again, the tagline is the only thing bringing this cover down. Is it supposed to be a pun? Is it just supposed to be straightforward and funny? I don't really get it. Once again, the original cover is going to get the win for this one. The new one just looks too cartoony. But again, I do like a little bit of the classic Goosebumps reprint. I feel like making the guy in the window a kid now fits the story a little better. Going to the book, it's about a family who inherited this really old house, and everyone in the neighborhood is really welcoming and excited to meet them, but the main character feels that something is off. She keeps hearing voices and she swears she keeps seeing ghosts in the house, and as you'd expect, her suspicions are real because it turns out that the entire town is haunted. And the house the family is staying at is called Dead House because that's the place that the new families come in to get murdered. Whoa, wait a minute, this is really dark! As a matter of fact, the whole book seems a lot darker and gorier than the rest of the Goosebumps books, but I kind of like it. The descriptions of the zombie-like kids and parents are really eerie, and there's a whole nightmare dream sequence with skeletons eating at the dinner table, and it's one that stuck with me for a while. This one is almost a 10 out of 10, it just ends up being really predictable, mainly due to the fact that the family's dog ends up figuring out that everyone else is a ghost and he starts barking at them, and you can read into that pretty easily. But still, it's one of my favorites, and it's the first in the series, so if you're gonna end up reading any of these, this one is a good start. Okay, The Abominable Snowman of Pasadena is so overhated. Put some respect on this book's name. The cover isn't exactly scary per se, but I think it's another example of just a fun cover. The tagline is perfectly cheesy, it's gonna get a 3 out of 5. The color scheme matches the artwork, the title is pretty fun, if only a little bit misleading because the Abominable Snowman isn't actually from Pasadena, he ends up only being in Pasadena for a little bit at the end. And the artwork could be a little bit more interesting, but I do like the design of the snowman and the palm trees in the background. With the classic Goosebumps reprint, I feel like the colors stand out a lot better, and I feel like the white fur on the snowman looks a little better. But as for the rest of the snowman's design, I feel like it's not that great, and the perspective could be a little better. So I think I'm going to give the win to the original cover again, but this is another one where I could prefer either depending on the day. As for the book, I feel like I really like it as much as I do just because of the characters and the setting. I love snowy Arctic settings, and I feel like this book pulls it off perfectly. The majority of the book takes place in this isolated Arctic town, and they're led by this mysterious, gruff-looking tour guide. They have sled dogs to search for the Abominable Snowman, and they're staying in this little wooden cabin. And I have a lot of fun envisioning all of this while I read. And once the kids end up finding the snowman, I think it's fun expectation subversion because the snowman is actually pretty harmless and actually kind of helpful. All the snowman really wants is the kids' trail mix, and he just kind of sits there afterwards. And he sits there so long that he just freezes himself in ice. So the main characters and their dad pull a repo and they just put the Abominable Snowman in their luggage. But not after the main character puts some snowballs in the suitcase as well. So when they go back home to Pasadena, the main character throws these snowballs, and it turns out that the snow is magic snow that freezes everything. So they have a fun little Arctic snowball fight, and then the main character throws a snowball at his sister, and then his sister freezes. But luckily they're able to pull the Abominable Snowman out, and he thaws the sister, and then he rolls around in snow, and then he runs away because everything is hot now. If you're looking for a scary Goosebumps book, this definitely isn't going to be the one for you, but if you like adventure stories like I do, then this is a great one, as it's my favorite of the adventure genre. It's our second 10 out of 10 on the list. It's just a really fun book. Come to think of it, I think I read all the books in my top 6 in 4th grade, and The Ghost Next Door is the Goosebumps book that got me to fall in love with the series. If it wasn't this one, then it was probably A Night in Terror Tower or the book that is number 1 on this list. This cover is one where when I look at it, I don't really have any strong feelings towards it, but the more I think about it, the more I realize it's a 5 out of 5. I mean, the title is perfect, the tagline is perfect, the artwork shows you everything you need to know, it just is missing a little extra something. And the color scheme is one of the only quote-unquote gross color schemes that I feel like works. It gives me a vibe of campfires, and that's gonna come into play later in this story. The classic Goosebumps cover is interesting, I feel like the ghost hand is drawn very cool. But the win is once again going to go to the original cover. I like seeing a human and a ghost in the artwork. The story starts off pretty simple. Hannah thinks the new kid, Danny, next door is a ghost, and there's a shadowy figure stalking Hannah, so that could also be a ghost. And yeah, there ends up being a ghost, but it's Hannah? We find this out 2/3 of the way through the book when we've already gotten attached to Hannah, and it is a game-changing twist. She had a nightmare of a fire in her house at the beginning of the book, but it turns out that that wasn't a nightmare, that was real life. Her family's house burnt down because a campfire in their backyard wasn't put out properly, and it turns out her whole family, including her, has been dead for 5 years. And she was sending her friends summer camp letters like the whole book, and then we find out that's why she hasn't been responding, it's because she's dead. Oh my god, it's so sad! But luckily, Hannah figures out that there's a reason she stayed as a ghost in the living world and has not passed on to the afterlife yet. It's because she has to save Danny from dying in a fire like she did. The only things keeping this from being a 10 out of 10 book are the predictability. It's really obvious on a reread that Hannah was the ghost, and if you were a little older reading this book, it probably would have been obvious from the start. But the other thing that bugs me is when Hannah's saving Danny from the fire, she just drags him out of the house. But this doesn't make sense because in the scene where we found out Hannah was a ghost, we realized she couldn't grab Danny's arm with hers. So why is she able to pull him out of the house now? I thought it would be more clever if she grabbed candles in the house he was in and then used the candles to drag him out or something. That's actually how I remembered it being written in the book. I don't know, I must just be misremembering it with another similar story like this. But still, the twist in this book me up in 4th grade. I think it's still the best twist in all of Goosebumps, and the icing on the cake is that the book is still enjoyable even after you know the ending. It's one that I was really excited to reread on my marathon, and it's definitely gonna get the bronze medal. It is insane how much better the original Say Cheese and Die is over Say Cheese and Die Again. First of all, the artwork for this cover is one of my favorites, if not favorite, Goosebumps artworks. It is the perfect balance between being goofy and scary at the same time. Title and tagline, though?
No.
Like, Say Cheese and Die? Like, I get you die, but like, why is that funny? Why is that clever? And the tagline, a picture's worth 1,000 screams? Like what are we doing? But luckily, the color scheme is great enough to save this one and keep it as a 4 out of 5. I like the concept for the classic Goosebumps reprint, but it just doesn't hit the same as the Skeleton Barbecue. The win is going to go to the original.
Not a victory for the OG.
Anyways, the premise for this book is so good. Greg and his friends find a camera in this old house, and whenever they take pictures with it, the pictures end up predicting bad things happening to his friends and family. It's a concept that Are You Afraid of the Dark like straight up stole from Goosebumps, and even I reference it in my novel. By the way, I wrote a novel, go read it, buy it on Amazon right now. But I feel like this book takes full advantage of the premise. It gets really scary at times. Like when Greg takes a photo of his dad's new car and the snapshot shows it being totaled, then we have a really scary scene where they're driving on the freeway and we keep on wondering if they're gonna be in a car crash, and they don't, but later that week, Greg's dad is in a car crash. And then when Greg takes a photo of his friend Sherry, she's not in the frame, and at her birthday party, after playing a round of hide and seek, Sherry is nowhere to be found. And just like with Welcome to Dead House, it doesn't lean into the silly, goofy Goosebumps humor. It ends up taking these scenarios really seriously. The ending also has a nice tie-in with this guy, Spidey, who's roaming around the old house where they found the camera, being one of the people who made the cursed camera. I mean, what else is there to say about this one? It's an all-time great Goosebumps book. But taking the top spot on this list, the last book in the mythical orange tin, and the one I was probably the most hyped to reread, Stay Out of the Basement. And if any book were to get a Goose score of 15, this would have been the one. You may not remember when I talked about Be Careful What You Wish For ages ago, but I said that that artwork was one of only 2 in the original series not illustrated by Tim Jacobus. Well, this was the other one. And you can tell because this cover goes for a more typical horror mood. I think the sight of the plant arm grabbing the door is really iconic and interesting, but it's just missing a little extra flair. But the color scheme and title are both gonna be a 5 out of 5. However, I'm gonna have to give the tagline a 4 out of 5. It is just a little too vague for me. But if the artwork was a little bit better or the tagline was a little bit better, this would have been a 5 out of 5, giving this book a 15 out of 15 Goose score. But oh, if this was Tim Jacobus' artwork, oh yeah, it's getting a 5 out of 5. This is one of the only cover arts in this series to traumatize me. I know it gives away the twist of the book a little more, but the tree person just looks so unnatural and horrifying. Body horror is something that really messes with me, and I feel like this is a great example of that. This tree mad scientist looks a lot like how Camilla ends up looking at the end of Bad Case of Stripes, which, yeah, that was another image that traumatized me as a kid. Oh, and for the final classic versus reprint, we're gonna give the win to the classic.
Not a victory for the OG.
I like the perspective of the reprint a little more. It just has way too many vines and leaves to look at. But look, this is my favorite Goosebumps book for a reason. It's a book where the characters are written extremely well, that it feels like it has a deeper meaning with parental trust issues. The main characters, Margaret and Casey, are worrying about their dad, who is a botanist, and he's spending all of his time downstairs in his lab ever since he got laid off from his job. As you'd assume from the title, their dad warns them to stay out of the basement, and it feels like he's hiding something really dangerous down there. The kid's mom leaves to check on one of their relatives, and they end up exploring the basement while the dad is taking her to the airport. And what they find down there is a ton of really creepy plant mutations. It feels like some of the plants are alive and breathing at them. And when the dad gets back from the airport, he starts acting weirder and weirder. He starts growing leaves for hair and eating plant food and serving green gunk to the kids. And the scariest part is, the kids are stuck with their dad because their mom is out of town. When Margaret and Casey end up going back down into the basement, they see a lot of plant and human hybrids, and that's a description that has really stayed with me over the years. And they also find their dad kidnapped in the basement, and he says that the dad that has been living with them is actually a plant copy of himself. And to see which one is real, Margaret just straight up stabs her dad at the end of the story. She remembers that the plant dad bled green blood, and so when she stabs her real dad and sees red blood come out, then they just chop the plant dad in half with an axe. And the ending is really ambiguous too, because we want to believe we got the right dad, but Margaret hears plants in her background saying that they're her real dad. Even though this is really a 14 out of 15 Goose score, you can put an asterisk next to this and be careful what you wish for on your spreadsheet if you want. If I was looking at my custom cover with Tim Jacobus' artwork, this would definitely be a 15 out of 15. And there we go. Those are my thoughts on all 62 of the original Goosebumps books. This was a project that was about half a year in the making, and I had a lot of fun putting it all together. I love these big ranking videos, and I hope you do as well. But anyways, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.